We are honored on this Good Friday evening for our chancel choir to be joined by the Chaffey College Chamber Choir and the Whittier College Choir for a Tenebrae service. That's a service where we progressively descend into the shadow and the darkness of Jesus' crucifixion, his placement in the tomb. This is an evening of reflection on what it means in this life to experience suffering in its many forms, to reflect on the suffering in this country and around the world, and where God might be in the midst of that suffering. So let us journey with Jesus to the cross this evening, beginning with a reading from the Gospels.
Our story tonight begins in the Gospel of Matthew. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for false testimony against Jesus so that they might put him to death, but they found none. Though many false witnesses came forward, at last 2 came forward and said, "This fellow said, 'I'm able to destroy the temple of God and to rebuild it in 3 days.'" The high priest stood up and said, "Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?" But Jesus was silent.
Matthew 27, 21 to 23. The governor again said to the people, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what should I do with Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" All of them said, "Let him be crucified." And then he asked, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified."
Luke chapter 22, verses 63 through 65. Now the men who were holding Jesus began to mock him and beat him. They also blindfolded him and kept asking, "Prophecy, who is it that struck you?" They kept heaping many other insults on him.
Matthew 27, verses 28 to 31. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. They put a reed in his right hand and knelt before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. After mocking him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. From the Gospel of Luke. When they came to the place that is called the Skull, they crucified Jesus there with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. Then Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they cast lots to divide his clothing. You are invited to make an offering tonight to support the missions of this church.
one of the criminals who were hanged there, kept deriding him and saying, "Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same condemnation? And we indeed have been condemned justly, for we are getting what we deserve for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." He replied, "Truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise."
Luke 23, verses 44 through 49. It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m, while the sun's light failed and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus, crying out with a loud voice, said, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." Having said this, he breathed his last. When the centurion saw what had taken place, he praised God and said, "Certainly this man was innocent." And when all the crowds who had gathered there for this spectacle saw what had taken place, they returned home, beating their breasts. But all his acquaintances, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance watching these things.
Good Friday is such a unique day in the Christian calendar. Unlike our high holy days of Christmas and Epiphany and Easter and Pentecost, Good Friday is somber. It's melancholy. It is a day when we spend an hour walking with Jesus from Pilate's chambers, where he is condemned to death, to the cross, where he is crucified, and to the tomb, where he is placed among the dead. And yet you will notice, just by looking around the sanctuary tonight, that not so many Christians observe Good Friday. Certainly fewer are present here tonight than any of the celebratory holidays I just mentioned. And while some can claim work or travel or family obligations, Friday nights are typically fairly flexible when it comes to scheduling. No, I've been leading Good Friday worship services for 10 years straight now. And I have to say, I think there is a deeper reason that we disciples of Jesus turn out in droves to celebrate the baby Jesus being born in a manger and the risen Christ alive and well outside of the empty tomb, but avoid this night of pain and sadness. I think it mirrors our daily lives. We as a society struggle to process and accept death and grief. We either avoid talking about this type of pain altogether in a state of perpetual denial, or we joke about it and normalize it by saturating our media with images of violence and death. And I think we do these things for good reason. Grief is hard. In my experience, it feels like a physical weight on the chest. The whole world seems gloomy and empty when you are grieving, and other people's happiness feels like an attack when you are grieving. Studies show that for many people, grief causes a loss of appetite. For others, overeating is attempted to dull the pain. Spontaneous crying, oversleeping, depression, and withdrawal from social engagements are all normal grieving behavior. It comes in waves, crashing over you when you least expect it, when you think you've moved on, and then something hits you, a song, a smell, a memory, and there you are grieving again. I once heard someone describe grief as pangs of fear of an unknown source. I heard someone else describe it as the ultimate loneliness. It's heavy stuff. No wonder so few followers of Christ want to spend time, even 1 hour a year, sitting inside this heaviness. We love Jesus. We want to follow his teachings and talk about his life and his ministry, to join him in the glory of his resurrection. But his death, we'd like to kind of gloss over that, not linger too long at the cross, because it is an ugly scene of torture. And yet, here you all are. Perhaps you, like me, believe that sitting with grief and pain is the only way to really get through it. Perhaps you, like me, believe that grieving is an important and necessary part of being human. That a grieving person is actually a healing person. A person who does not shy away from the shadow side of life because they understand that to fully live and embrace the fragile beauty of life, we must understand and accept death. Grieving sets us free from the cages of fear and denial. Grieving is a sacred act. Grieving honors the love we have for whomever or whatever we are grieving in their death. And while grieving can initially make us feel weak, it is actually a very powerful state that rebuilds us through our brokenness to be even stronger on the other side of it. Pastor Jacob and I always tell the congregation that Easter will be so much more meaningful for you, so much more triumphant, so much more victorious if you come to Good Friday. Because when you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, the sunshine we will see when the tomb is unsealed will shine all the brighter. No, grieving cannot be skipped, and it cannot be rushed. It must wash over us and cleanse us from the inside out like a good hard cry or a deep, deep sleep. I wonder if that is the reason Jesus remained sealed in the tomb for 3 days. God knew we would all rush to the resurrection, trying not to let our hearts break over the death of an innocent man. We're always trying to avoid heartbreak, aren't we? Especially over deaths of innocents. From the ongoing wars around the world to the natural disasters which destroy entire communities. From people like Trayvon Martin and Breonna Taylor and Eric Garner and Freddie Gray and Tamir Rice and George Floyd and the laundry list of people of color who have been unjustly murdered in our country, to the victims of every mass shooting in America, especially the children of Sandy Hook Elementary School, of Robb Elementary School, and the Covenant School in Nashville. Every Good Friday, when I remember Jesus' unjust, untimely death at the hands of the violent Roman Empire, I think of the growing list of victims that constantly splash across our headlines in one long, slow marquee of terror. So how do we cope? We compartmentalize. We shake our heads in sadness, and then we move on. I told my counselor last week that I was feeling depressed and anxious in the wake of the most recent school shooting. I've always been horrified by all shootings, but especially as a parent, I'm struggling to process the sheer ugliness of our current reality. And when I asked for advice, she said, you have to allow yourself to feel those feelings of grief and fear and sadness. But after an appropriate amount of time, you have to move forward. I thought that was good advice. Except, what is the appropriate amount of time to grieve lost lives? What is the appropriate amount of time to feel sad about empty seats at tables on Easter Sunday, and empty car seats in minivans, and empty desks in classrooms? What is the appropriate amount of time to feel heartache over families that will never be the same? For siblings and parents and sons and daughters and aunts and uncles and cousins and neighbors who will live with the trauma of losing a loved one to senseless violence for the rest of their lives. Tonight, let it be 1 hour. Tonight, let us not run away from the pain and the sadness and the grief of our broken world. Tonight, let us sit in this together, to carry the weight of it together. Tonight, let us grieve as a community for Jesus and for all of the ones he loved who have shared in his same unspeakable fate. It is not comfortable. It is not easy. But I have faith that together, we can bear this terrible burden. Jesus said, "You did not choose me, but I chose you." So, church, let us watch and wait. Perhaps on the third day, he will rise again. And if he does, perhaps we will too. Amen.
For so long by itself.